Minister, we welcome this introduction of this piece of legislation, which, as far as I can see, seeks to, I suppose, streamline the process of Garda compensation claims and to bring them in line effectively with other litigation of a similar nature which goes through our courts, and indeed to apply some of the improvements and efficiencies that this government has brought in other areas, similar areas to the process, and streamline it in such a way. So it's very welcome and common sense with provision, but it's great to see the government doing this, bringing it through. I note that the new PIAB guidelines, which were adopted, I think, by the Judicial Council last year, are applicable now to Garda claims, which makes eminent sense because an injury in one walk of life is effectively has the same impact on somebody's day-to-day operations and prospects, etc., as an injury sustained in another walk of life. So it would make perfect sense that the same guidelines would apply. I note that there would be, I suppose, what would often be called a cost differential order applicable if a claim was initiated in a higher court than the court that it ultimately was found to be merited in. So if somebody brings a case in the High Court when really it was a district or circuit court case and incurs additional costs upon both sides for doing so, the norm is that they would be penalised for doing that in the sense that they would have that taken off their award ultimately. Again, it makes perfect sense, and it's designed to encourage people to litigate in the right jurisdiction in the right court, and that's already done in many other walks of life in the courts. So again, it makes sense to apply those rules here. I see that being brought in. I think PIAB are going to have an increased role in the system here, rather than the historical authorisation granted for a Garda compensation claim. Now PIAB will process those, I understand, in the same way as they process any other personal injuries claim. Again, that makes perfect sense. And I note that if the assessment is accepted, then that will be taken on board and it avoids the need for litigation altogether. And again, that's something that's worked quite well in the personal injury sphere over the last 20 years. And again, this brings it in line with that. I would look at the efforts of our government colleague, Minister Troy, to actually reform PIAB further. And I suppose when I'm on my feet on this topic, Minister Troy is looking at making PIAB itself a kind of quasi-judicial body that could actually, analogous to the WRC or to the RTB or some of those bodies that exist, which process claims in a there is oral evidence submitted and there are submissions made, but perhaps slightly less formal than a courtroom and certainly less expensive than a courtroom situation. And I commend Minister Troy's efforts in that regard. I think he's having some resistance in some quarters, but I think it is a good idea, and I think maybe something that could be looked at here. I think that would be another way to take some of the cost out of personal injury claims, and less these ones, since they're coming into that process as well. I note too that the State Claims Agency will now be nominated as the, I suppose, official liaison or the driver of these claims from a state point of view. Again, it makes perfect sense. That would be the norm with all other litigation against the state, that the State Claims Agency would take carriage of those rather than the Minister or the Commissioner or somebody being empowered to do so. I think there may be historical anomalies that have been tidied up with this, and really it's bringing it into line. I want to salute the work that the Garda do, and we've heard that from many speakers already, and I just want to add my voice to those in terms of putting themselves in harm's way, in terms of going into the community, and they're very much rooted in the community, and we do have largely an unarmed force who derive their, I suppose, their defence from the respect that they enjoy from the population by and large. They are unarmed, as has been said, but they put themselves in harm's way for our support and protection, and you know, that is something that we really cannot ever take for granted, and we really must respect that role that they play. I did note that actually, I think in 2020, reports tell us that 200 Gardaí were injured in the line of duty, and I think for 2021 it appears to be 243, so even there's an increase there into last year. So look, that's 243 too many, 200 too many the year before. But unfortunately, this is a pattern, and in a way it goes with the territory. Not to in any way excuse it or play it down, but they are people who, for the greater good, to serve the public, to serve the state, to serve this republic, they do put themselves in harm's way to defend all of us, and we enjoy the protection that they grant us. So I want to commend the force for that and salute them in that. I do, however, want to also make a point that while it's just and right that any member of the Gardaí who is injured in the line of duty in such a way should be eligible for compensation, I wonder, is there an argument for extending that to other areas also? And people like prison officers have been mentioned, cab officers. There's the concept of authorised officers in many pieces of legislation where people can, I suppose, be involved in sort of law enforcement type activities that may be outside the scope of this as currently constituted. Perhaps they could be brought back in. But I'd even go outside the traditional law enforcement bodies, and I'd say, what about teachers, for example? Teachers in a classroom can come up against harm, be that physical or psychological. It happens, unfortunately. You know, there's experiences there. There are people in other emergency services, be that ambulance people, personnel, be it hospital porters, be it people in the fire service. So there are many other areas, I think, that are put themselves in the firing line, in the line of duty, and they're not covered by this bill, and I'm not sure if they're covered by any bill. So without in any way taking from the fine work that our Gardaí do, I do wonder why there's a special process for Gardaí that doesn't exist for, as I say, teachers, fire services, other emergency personnel. Even if we all think in this House, there's been many reports of constituency offices coming under threat. I'm thinking of our staff, constituency office that man the front lines every day, some of whom have been threatened, thankfully none have been assaulted to date, touch wood, but that is again, there are many walks of life who serve the public by making this available, who could come into harm, and I just think, should we look at broadening this device? If we're going to have a scheme, perhaps it should be that little bit wider. I just ask the Minister to consider that. Finally, just while I'm on my feet, it would be remiss of me, and others have done so, not to mention the situation in my own county and County Kildare. Unfortunately, had for a long time the dubious distinction of being the least number of Gardaí per capita in the country in terms of the number of personnel serving Kildare. We have thankfully received additional recruits. However, I think we need that sort of stellar leap to get up to, because if we get the same number per rata as every other county gets, we're still behind. And I think really it's traditionally we were resourced as a sort of outpost of Dublin that was sort of a couple of rural barracks. Back in, I suppose, the days of John Peel and beyond. We're now very much the Greater Dublin area with I think possibly the third highest population in the county, of any county. We're very much a very urban conglomerate, very built up, but we haven't had that injection of resources to match that in terms of the demographics of the population. So something I would just say to the Minister, I know it's an operational issue for the Gardaí Commissioner, but I would just ask the Minister to take note of that, and in any discussions where it might arise, it's something that I would continually beat the drum on. Thank you, Garda.